evening, England. I'm Ricky Coburn reporting to you on one of the most tragic days in our history. Our Queen has died, and it is time for the accession of King James. Today I'm here to tell you that the late Queen was one of the most amazing and inspiring women of our time. Here on English Channel Action News, we're bringing to you the story of Queen Elizabeth I.
Elizabeth was born in 1533 to King Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn. Her father, Henry VIII, was ironically a very misogynistic ruler who did not believe that a woman should be able to preside over a man. He did not expect his daughter to hold any power or be capable of taking charge of affairs of state. Elizabeth's father had only wanted a son to succeed him, so when his daughter was born on September 7, 1533, he was anything but happy. While her father skipped out on her luxurious christening, the citizens of London celebrated the royal birth with bonfires. Since Henry VIII wanted a son terribly, and his wife Anne wasn't coming through, he wrongfully accused her of plotting against him, sleeping with other men, and said she had seduced him by witchcraft. Anne Boleyn was sentenced to death on May 19, 1536. The date would have been sooner, but the Queen requested her beheading be done by an expert swordsman instead of a standard axe beheading. The King called for an executioner from France, who had the skills Anne required. After her mother's death, Elizabeth was illegitimized and grew up feeling more and more humiliation from her mother's reputation. She began her formal education when she was 4 and was known as an extremely polite and intelligent young lady by her household servants. In 1537, Elizabeth's half-brother Edward was born. His mother, Jane Seymour, died a few days after giving birth to him. Elizabeth and Edward were in the same boat, both having lost their mothers at a very young age. Because of this, the two children formed a very close bond. This meant a lot to Elizabeth since her sister, Mary, and her got along but were never really close due to their opposing religious views and Elizabeth being 17 years younger than Mary. Elizabeth suffered a pretty hard childhood. Her mother was dead, she had 3 stepmothers, 2 of those had died, and it all happened in 8 years. It is assumed that the reason the Queen never married was because of the impression the deaths of these married women had left on her. Elizabeth never really got along with her father either, and when she was 14 years old on January 28, 1547, King Henry died to a massive ulcer on his leg. Prince Edward became King Edward VI shortly after. This, however, did not last long, and after 6 years, King Edward died of consumption on July 6, 1553, and Mary was crowned the Queen of England on July 19, 1553. Mary and Elizabeth still weren't the best of friends, mainly because they had different views on religion. This didn't help Elizabeth when her name came up in a plot to overthrow Queen Mary that Elizabeth wasn't even involved with. She was taken as a prisoner to the Tower of London. However, after a short time in the Tower, it became clear that there wasn't enough evidence to prove Elizabeth was guilty, and Elizabeth's increasing popularity in the country all benefited her, and she was released. But she was not given her freedom and became a prisoner at the Manor of Woodstock for a year. After she was freed and her sister accepted her as heir to the throne, Mary died on November 17, 1558, and Elizabeth was finally crowned the Queen of England. The first thing the country expected their new queen to do after she was crowned was to get married and become pregnant. Elizabeth's people wanted a royal family to look up to and assumed their queen would want an heir on the way. Queen Elizabeth wasn't as eager, but had many earls, princes, kings, and dukes after her hand. The queen never did figure out what she wanted when it came to marriage, but did a wonderful job at ruling her beloved country without a man by her side. In Elizabeth's first speech to her subjects after Mary died, she provided her listeners with 2 major points surrounding her being the ruling authority. She explained to her people that when she became queen, her gender had nothing to do with the way she ruled, and she was going to use her new power to rule and govern with authority. Queen Elizabeth proved to her people that she did not need a husband because she was already married to England by her many gracious acts, such as reducing the amount the crown spends on its own wardrobe, constantly traveling around the realm to see her people, and ruling only for the benefit of her people. Queen Elizabeth had an amazing reign over England. She ended a rebellion, strengthened the Anglican Church, defeated the Spanish Armada, and was an inspiration to those that loved her. Her death in the year 1603 is the end of an era, the Elizabethan era.